everyone. I'm your host, as always, Guy, bringing you another episode of The Unseen Journey, brought to you by Operation Red Wings Foundations. Do us a favor, if you haven't done so already, reach down there, hit the like and subscribe button. There is a link down there for you to check out ORW Foundation and all the retreats we offer for veterans, both male and individual, spouses, couples, and families. I highly recommend them all. I'm a team leader with the foundation, and I've been through every one of the retreats. Today we've got a special guest with us, Robert. Robert, how you doing, brother?
All right, brother. What's going on?
Just living the dream. It actually got cold down here. I think it's like in the 60s. I think it was like in the 50s this morning.
Yeah.
I think you said you're coming to us from North Carolina. Is that correct?
Yep. Right outside of Fort Bragg. Well, formerly Fort Bragg. Yeah.
Yeah, no, hey, bro, it's all good, man. I started there. That's where my AIT, Advanced Individual Training, was. I spent my first 4 years there, and then spent my last years there as I was retiring out of the military. So I know all about that area, affectionately called Vietnam. And I'm originally actually from North Carolina. I was born it's kind of southeast of Charlotte. I always just say Charlotte because you start saying some of the smaller areas and people are like, where? But you say Charlotte, usually people know that.
Oh, sure.
That hub. Yeah, for sure. So Robert, tell us just a little bit about yourself. I know you were in the Army, correct?
Nope. Marine Corps.
No, Marine. Oh my gosh, but you're in Fayetteville.
Yeah. We have a joke out here that it took a jarhead coming to an Army town to teach everybody how to farm. So
well, my father-in-law will appreciate that. His name's Ronnie, and he is a farmer up in a little tiny town called Angier, North Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're a bird and you fly north out of Fayetteville up towards Raleigh, somewhere about the halfway-ish point, you'll hit his small farms, about 29, 30 acres. Berries, pick your own berries. Pretty cool. Pretty nice place to be able to go hang out at.
Is he a veteran?
He is not.
Okay.
Nope, he is not. Tell you a quick story, and then we can hear a little bit about you.
Cool.
So I met my wife Kelly in college, and if anyone wants to, jump back some episodes and hear the whole, like engagement. I don't know whether you want to call it like fiasco or escapade. Anyways, it worked out. Whatever. So I met Kelly, my wife, in college, and then of course had to have the approval of dad and mom. And day after Kelly and I are engaged, we're on the farm, and I hear a yell come up the stairs about 5 a.m. Right, makes sense. It was Ronnie, and asked me to come downstairs to help him out with a couple things, right? I was engaged at this point, whatever, pseudo in the family, we'll call it. And then he yells a key piece that I still remember to this day, which is, wear some clothes you don't mind ruining. And I was like, I'm not really sure what that means, but okay. And I really didn't have like a large clothes selection because it was a weekend off of college, and I had just gone up there to do the proposal to my wife on the farm where she grew up.
Yeah.
It's been in their family like 150, 200 years, something like that. So a lot of history, a lot of meaning there. And we ended up getting married there on the farm. Anyways, fast forward, we go outside, and he has these giant 5-gallon buckets of paint. Robert, have you ever worked with aluminum paint before, brother?
Not really, no.
No. Oh, you don't ever like the image I'll draw to everyone, like a famous movie that might be easy for everyone to connect to is Shawshank Redemption. And the guys are on the roof and they're tarring, and they've got buckets, and it's that thick tar, and they've got mops, and they're like mopping, and it's summertime, right? Aluminum paint by name is aluminum. It's a liquid version of aluminum, very thick, kind of like what you would see in the movie Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, you're talking about Cool Seal. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm working with that.
Okay. And you use it to redo all the aluminum, right? The roofing on the barns, of which there were 5 at this point. 2 have been torn down. 3 have been torn down. There's 2 left. Anyways, And so he has a lull on the farm. You know, it's got like the little basket, you stand in it, and the lull like lifts you up kind of like an elevator. And then he put me on the roof. So five barns at the time I did this. This is circa 2005 ish, 2004 ish, somewhere in there. No, 2005. We were engaged for a year, and so I spent the day in the middle of North Carolina, um, almost summer, full blown summertime, with a mop and 5 gallon buckets of
Mm-hmm.
aluminum paint. Going to town on these barns. It was really hard. I sweated a lot. And my favorite snapshot memory of that day was I saw, because Kelly and her mom were like looking at dresses and doing wedding planning and all that stuff. So I really didn't see him a lot. But I see him, coming up in one of the old school like golf carts, and there's three glasses of tea, and the only kind of tea on a farm in North Carolina is sweet tea. And and I see these three, just the greatest looking glasses of tea I've ever seen in my life, with
Mm-hmm.
ice in them, and they're cold. And I'm up there, like, my shirt is soaked, I'm dripping sweat. The sun is, like this old school, like when people would like lay down with the reflectors.
Yep.
That's what the aluminum is doing to me as I'm painting this aluminum with the sun. And they drive up, and I'm just thinking about, I'm just looking, I'm just like I can't even like yell down for one of these glasses of tea.
Sure.
And I see the one glass get handed out, and then I see Ronnie's hand, and I see him start drinking it. Well, he's sitting in the lull with a fan blowing on him under a cover. So he's drinking tea. They've been inside all day. They're drinking tea.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Finally, they look up at me because I think they asked the question about like how I was doing or where I was at. And I'm just looking at them like, like, please have mercy on me. Oh, I'll never forget that. So,
Sounds
yeah,
about right. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Out there farming, I know, marine. Just tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, I never, ever, ever intended on doing the work I'm doing. This was not even close to being on my radar at all.
Nice.
I grew up in Franklin County, which is right above Wake County,
Yep.
on a 1,000-acre farm. And we did commodity crops and cattle, and ran 2,000 meat goats at one time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was old farm passed down through the generations and stuff. But anyway, growing up, it was extremely hard for my folks, and seeing them, what they were going through, because in the 80s in agriculture, and I mean, there's a lot of deep rabbit holes we can go down on this topic, but in the 80s, everything in agriculture seemed to change, and it was extremely detrimental to family farms during that time. Market crashes, bank repossessions, all that kind of stuff was going on, and
Yep.
snatch and grabs on land and all that kind of thing. Watching them go through that and come to the decision that they needed to quit farming and start to focus their efforts in something outside the farm. I love the work every day, but I absolutely despised how it happened with my family, and growing up in that area, the only opportunities you really got are military college, or start changing oil, or being a farmer or carpenter in the area, out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I have a brother-in-law from Hall River, not far from where you're talking about. So yeah, got it.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're pretty secluded up there too, but Haw River's gorgeous.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, so I joined the Corps and got out as soon as I could get out of there, and trying to do something else other than farming with my life. Anyway, 5 years active duty, served in 3 different PCSs, El Toro and Miramar, California, Okinawa, and then Cherry Point, and then contracted for 10 years after that with the same unit in Cherry Point. So, got out because my knees were blown. And anyway, wound up losing the contract in 2011. And in eastern North Carolina, around the Marine Corps bases, there was about 3,000 layoffs and cuts to contract agencies that were going on in that area. So any job that was down there in eastern North Carolina disappeared pretty quick during that time. Yeah. And plus, we were just starting to come out of the recession then, so there was still a lot of really bad economic insecurity going on at the time. Well, the only real option that I had was to move back to the family farm. And luckily the original home on the farm was still there, and was able to move in there and sell my house down at the coast. And I still did not want to get into farming. I wound up changing oil for a guy I was in high school with for $12 an hour part-time. And until I got yelled at for putting a serpentine belt on backwards because he couldn't read the numbers on them. And I was like, look, bro, I just did 15 years of getting yelled at by guys way bigger than you. And we're not going to play that shit here.
Yeah, I don't blame you, man.
Yeah. So tried college and flunked out my first semester at the university. I got my associates, but I've transferred into NC State engineering and flunked out the first semester, and had a lot of other personal issues going on. But at that time, that was like the first solid year after Marine Corps that I was trying to make civilian life work. And those days, veteran suicide and transitional phase in the first year is pretty ridiculously high. And
for sure.
I started getting into that mind space and becoming suicidal, because you lose the network, you lose the way of life, you lose all of that stuff almost overnight, and you don't know how to hack it. So anyway, everything I was doing was falling apart, and everywhere I turned seemed to be another dead end. And then, all of my loss of the last 15 years of my life, I started going bonkers. But anyway, finally, of all things to help me out was a few chickens I had in the backyard, man. One of them just never left me alone. And it was like something was talking to me and telling me, you need to start farming again. And I barely had a penny to my name at the time. I didn't get VA benefits. That was a pretty gnarly fight to get any of those.
About roughly what year did you transition?
Well, I got out of the Marine Corps. I EAS'd in 2002, and 2011 is when I came home, and finished up the contract position. But yeah, so I didn't have VA benefits or anything like that at the time. And I had been tired of trying to fight with them to try to get any benefits out of them. But I finally just bit the bullet, and the only thing I owned at the time was a motorcycle. I wound up selling that for $1,500, and luckily to a website designer who did a really good job on my original website for the farm, and started producing chicken and pork, and really came at it from the perspective of business and entrepreneurial rather than farmer, because there's a clear distinction between the two. And growing up on the farm, I always watched my folks who were absolutely ridiculously good at producing a crop or producing livestock and stuff like that, but they didn't have business sense to save their lives. They didn't like watching trends that are coming in and out of ag and staying away from them, because, it's just going to cause oversupply and then a crash in the market and stuff like that. We see that all the time in the agricultural industry. Or being able to think outside of the box and think creatively with a business on, how do I maximize what it is my base product is actually going to be, and start to involve things like agritourism and stuff like that, adding those into the operation, and, doing stuff that actually brings money into the farm instead of what I refer to as kind of agricultural production enslavement, where you're at the discretion and under the power of a contract that's telling you what they're going to pay you for a product, which is how American agriculture is today, on the large scale. But anyway, I got smart about it and started cranking hogs. I figured out hogs was where the money was, in terms of, profit margins and stuff like that, and unit cost versus unit return on a pound, and started to really focus on that, brokering beef and adding beef into the operation. And then I started figuring out delivery and agritourism. And, in a lucky sequence of events, I wound up delivering pork, chicken, and beef products to corporate office buildings in Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill every Friday. And that's when the business really took off and started to run and make solidified money. And that process took about 3 years from selling the motorcycle to getting there, before I was able to actually do it, and utilizing all of these thoughts outside of the box on marketing and how to actually make the money. So anyway, I had received this tiny grant from Rural Advancement Foundation International, nonprofit based out of Pittsburgh that was administering tobacco grant money to farmers so that they could change out of tobacco into something else because tobacco fell apart.
Right.
But I got an $8,000 grant for chicken processing equipment from them to start doing chicken on the farm and producing chicken and processing it myself. And they asked me to come. They knew my story and asked me to come speak because they were having this big round table of all of the ag players and VA players and veterans and stuff, where they were interested in seeing more veterans getting into agriculture. And they wanted me to come tell my story to it. So that's kind of the first time I ever publicly spoke. I was like, yeah, sure. And I went out there and I explained what it was like to be a veteran. The way I explain it to a civilian audience now is, picture yourself on a plane going to Tahiti or something like that. You crash on a deserted island and you got 40 survivors and y'all are stuck there for the next 4 to 10 years because nobody can find you. So your survival depends on those folks around you at all times, like they depend on you. And one day a helicopter picks you up and drops you back off into life as you used to know it. And you don't know how to deal with that any longer because it's completely like with a veteran versus a civilian mode of thinking. Problems that we see civilians going through are so minuscule compared to the things that we know about the rest of the world and how the world actually operates.
Right.
So, it utilizing that kind of idea to understand what a veteran actually kind of is going through seems to sink home with a lot of the civilian audiences that I have to speak about what it is we actually do with what I'm doing now. So anyway, I was not expecting that speech to blow up. I was not expecting anything to come of it. And they all asked for a copy of it. It got tossed around to news agencies. They were knocking on my door and wanting to do interviews about PTSD and ag and this and that. And how did the chicken save you? And pretty soon after that, I am on the road speaking everywhere, it seemed, and being invited all the way up to the U.S. Department of Ag in D.C. to speak to the Secretary and Undersecretary of Ag. Anyway, veterans started reading the story, and I started getting a flood of calls and emails from vets that were either farming and and struggling with it in North Carolina and across the country, or vets that are sort of like, dude, what you're doing sounds like exactly what I think I should get into. That sounds like something I could totally do. And that's how Veterans Farm of North Carolina started. So what I did was I started going around and meeting other vets that were producing stuff and telling them how I was making money and giving them some ideas about stuff. And the guys and girls that wanted to learn, I'd just invite them out to my farm and we'd work day to day and they would learn the ins and outs of what it is I was doing and just crash on the couch or whatever if they're from a long ways away. But that's how everything started. And I started putting together a network of vets that I was working with in North Carolina to start helping each other and talk to each other and stuff like that, you know? And I got invited to speak again at the, I was nominated for an award and was given it for Small Innovative Farmer of the Year in North Carolina by the Commissioner of Ag. And I spoke at this function. All the who's in ag were there, and basically told them, look, you've got an untapped resource of veterans and workforce that y'all aren't even considering, with 8 military installations in North Carolina alone.
For sure.
Y'all need to get in there and start working with these folks, because they're a force to be reckoned with if you can bring them into your company or put them in the field or whatever you need. And NC State was standing at the bottom of the stage when I got off and said, we'd like for you to come to work for us part-time and be a liaison between the College of Ag and the military installations. So I started bouncing around, helping with them a little bit. And down here at Fort Bragg, the transition officer was extremely interested in whether or not I could build an agricultural program for transition and service members on the installation here. So we went out and got some money from NC State, through NC State and the Golden Leaf Foundation, and set up the Soldier to Agriculture program, which is the first and only, to my knowledge, ag training program for transition and service members on a military installation in the world. We ran that for 5 years, and it was a massive success. Nice. Almost every class I had was pretty much full at capacity over the years. And anyway, that program has since moved over to Cooperative Extension, which is an arm of the Land Grant University. And they're running it out of the Cumberland County office now, so it's not even on the base any longer. But we help out that program a lot. And I started to focus on a much bigger program, because the problem with Fort Bragg was we had plenty of lab space, but we couldn't do anything with livestock at all. I mean, on a military installation, they were like, "Yeah, no, you're not bringing chickens and cows in here."
And there's not, I mean, having spent a lot of time at Fort Bragg, now Liberty, there's not a lot of land space for the number of people. And you know this, even though you're in the Marine Corps, like Fort Bragg has such a high population density for service members and units at it, that what land it does have is heavily, and I do mean heavily, utilized. Even down to, just struggling over training sites. And, a lot of that has to do with kind of the way Fort Bragg got built around, I would say, just with different towns and everything kind of cropping up and boxing it in. Before we jump back into your story, though, I want to touch on a couple things, because you've brought up some just awesome points. One is I think it is very cool how you brought awareness to this idea of the transition and just how different it is transitioning as a veteran versus, general public, right? Because I think about, for example, my sister, who's changed jobs, I don't even know how many times. However, she's always been an accountant, right? She's always been in accounting. So it might have been a different, at one point she worked for Wake Forest University out in Greensboro, North Carolina. So it might have been a difference of, public and private sector, but the job she was doing didn't shift significantly. And back to that core, right? When you're in the military and you do that for as long as you did and I did, you hit it right on the head. It becomes the individual's identity. And so overnight, we transitioning veterans lose our identity. And it's not just go find a job like concern or problem. It's literally an identity crisis, which is a huge piece of that unseen journey. And like you said, leads to so much of the struggle a lot of veterans don't make it through, which is that depression, suicide, turning to drugs and alcohol, ending up on the street, things of that nature. So I think it's awesome that you have brought to light that point. I think, and I wanted to highlight that because that's a huge piece of that. transition and that struggle that is really hard to kind of process or understand unless like you've been through that experience and lived it. The other thing I wanted to point out, because you kind of brought this up, and this was why I asked you roughly about your transition time out of the Marine Corps. I'm actually working with two Marine veterans right now who both are still, one of them has zero VA benefits to this day, Nathan, and he works with a prominent home builder. He works with Pulte here locally in Florida. And, combat veteran out of the Marine Corps, multiple deployments, you know, got out and man, his story is as thick as it could be, right? And
Yeah.
I just recently helped him understand how to go register with the VA to get his VA ID and those things. And now I'm getting ready to sit down with him and help him file for his first filing. And the other Marine guy that I've been working with, Sean, not much different, but Sean took the extreme nosedive, right? Like you were teetering on that edge. Sean ended up actually homeless for a while because of his fight with his PTSD, depression, um,
Yeah.
and the things that pile on for us veterans sometimes to cope with, without getting into too much detail. And thank goodness, he kind of there's a cool saying, right? Like, sometimes you got to hit rock bottom. However, rock bottom can be a great place to build a foundation from. This is rock bottom, right? It's solid. And he's one of those
Yeah.
examples. And him and I sat down last week, went through his file and just looking at it and all the things. And he's another one of those Marine veterans, a little bit after your transition time. Nathan was close to your transition time, where it highlights the difference, in my opinion, in a lot of the veterans, like my friends and you, who kind of got out a little bit ahead of some of us who are still kind of through some of those surge years, and just the fight that you all had to do that honestly like helped shift and pave the way. And now we've come so far forward that we've got craziness like the PACT Act, right? Helping a lot of veterans out. And if you're a veteran out
Yeah.
there without benefits, or you don't know what I'm talking about when I say the PACT Act, please, please, please jump on Google, just type in VA space PACT PACT Act. It's
Yes.
impressive all the number of presumptive conditions that are now connected, and they did not have to be in your medical records. It's just based on your deployment history and where in the world you went.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so I think, it's cool. Your platform, your stage was agriculture, and yet you brought a lot, and I do mean a lot of awareness and discussion to this veteran transition and veteran space, which is awesome. And hats off. I appreciate it. I applaud you for it. But please continue. You were kind of telling us a little bit more about how you were kind of starting to get the nonprofit going and some work you were doing down there in North Carolina. They kind of weren't letting you bring livestock onto Fort Bragg. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Yeah. But before I go into that, I've worked with thousands at this point of veterans who, and you guys know people like this all the time that, nah, somebody else needs that benefit
Oh,
worse than I do.
yes.
Nah, I'm not. So I wanted to spell that real quick that when, because this is what I tell pretty much everybody is VA works on a budget system like
Yep.
everybody else. So if you think that you are being a hero by not going after your benefits, what you're actually doing is screwing the guy that
Yep.
needs them worse than you, because you are holding that budget down by not applying for your
Mm-hmm.
benefits, which does not grow the budget to help the rest of everybody else out there. So when you signed up, you were pretty much 100% in terms of
Mm-hmm.
physical and mental health as far as the U.S. government considers it. But if you were in the Marine Corps or the Army, specifically those two, and just in the trainings that we've had to go through in those two military services, you're already got disabilities coming out the gate from doing some very basic training stuff, level stuff. If you spend a career in the Army or the Marine Corps, you've got a lot more disabilities. And if you deployed, there is no reason why somebody from the Army or the Marine Corps that deployed shouldn't be at 100% to this day.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Robert. And a really cool fact that I learned to share kind of this piece is, I vaguely do I remember signing up on the dotted line. And I launched my career in October of 2002, actually, because you mentioned transitioning in 2002. Yep. And got my 20 years in. However, when we, and I learned this from a talk I listened to actually on LinkedIn from one of the senior people at the VA. When we as service members sign up to that service component, doesn't matter, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, Space Force now, well, I guess we'll count them, right? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but they got to earn some stripes, bro.
Yeah. I need you guys to stop letting China mess with all of our stuff over here. Kick them out. Let's go.
Yeah. We need to see you go bang on a submarine hatch and give yourself credibility like Coast Guard did.
There we go. Well, so when an individual signs up for one of those service components, we sign on the dotted line, we agree to serve. There is a pot of money that sets aside money, already assuming that you are going to come out with disabilities. It's already there.
Yep.
And when you don't go after those disabilities, whether it's through your service component or through the VA, exactly what you're saying, Robert, that money just gets recycled back into the government. It was no one else's money.
Yep.
When I signed on the dotted line, put my name, Guy, down, that money was allotted for me, right? And I did my combat deployments, and I happened to have done my 20. But even if I hadn't, even my friends who did, 4 years, and in that time, some, surge years. So like some of those deployments were 15 months, 18 months, just the wreckage on your mental health alone from being gone that amount of time is enough to say you're owed something, right? And you're right. Our culture in the military is we get in this mentality of, put your troopers first, put your soldiers first, mission first, right? And so it's we've talked about this on a previous episode where I say we're programmed to think about this word in terms of selfishness, right? Like almost being selfish to go get our benefits. Mm-hmm. The reality is we need to think about it in terms of self-care. It is self-care that we go get our benefits because like you, right, it helps financial stability. Same with me. And now we can go out and we can be selfless again. I'm donating some time to friends that I've made along the way since I've been out and even moved down here in Florida in July, helping them go get their benefits. You started a nonprofit, right? Helping people learn and understand farming. And it's changing that mentality from if I take care of myself, I'm being selfish. I got to help everyone else out. To no, I got to do some self-care. Yeah. I got to take care of myself, and then I'll be in a position to help everyone else out. And now I can go be selfless. And you're right. It's almost like it's an innate part of our culture through our training and our experiences. And so that's another part of that identity crisis, that identity shift. Once we transition, it's can you make that next step, right?
Yeah. And I mean, that's exactly the whole premise of what we've built with Veterans Farm in North Carolina. When I transitioned over to building what we're doing now, just to give you a rundown on it, it's a 53-acre training facility.
Nice.
Just north of Bragg. I get to sleep soundly to machine gun fire and artillery,
and the helicopter air corridor. When I team lead, so ORW Foundation, for everyone out there, for our veterans. By the way, hit the like and subscribe. Check out the link to ORW Foundation. Check out the link to Robert's nonprofit if you're interested in learning about farming. It's going to be down there. Come to a retreat, do some self-care so you can go out and be selfless for others. However, when I do retreats out there as a team leader and the guys and girls show up, I'm always like, hey, look, you're going to hear helicopters. It's not a flashback. There's an air corridor. And you might hear the artillery fire. especially when the Marine Corps comes over with their artillery too to Bragg, and all of a sudden now you got the Marines and the Army out
Yep.
there, like just pounding Fort Bragg, which is not a big area.
Yeah, it's not. It's not. That was a trip when I moved down here originally. It was a trip because the Facebook groups and stuff for Fort Bragg, they all start talking about the Marines are coming, the Marines are coming. And then it's just unholy hell dropping on Fort Bragg for like 2 weeks. And I'm like, yeah, get them.
Because they don't just shoot during the day. Those guys will wake up at like 2 a.m.
No.
and all of a sudden they'll have like a fire for effect, and you're hearing like 200 rounds landing in the impact zone. And you're like, what's going on?
Yeah. I love those weeks when they come. I love it. It's great.
I bet your livestock loves it too. Speaking of,
oh, they're fine with it, man. I've got battle hardened livestock out here. I think there's a Chinook going over, there's a Cobra or whatever, Apaches and all that crap going right over. I mean, we're just north of Polk and Fort Bragg, right beside Overhills. So, all of the traffic coming from aircraft is right over the farm, probably 100 to 200 meters over the top of the house. So, they're used to it, man. They're fine.
I got to ask two very serious questions, because this has been hanging in my head since the beginning of us chatting when you mentioned it, right? So, because part of the retreats we do is we go out and do equine therapy, right? So therapeutic horses. And it sounds like you had like a therapeutic chicken. So for your therapy chicken, did you name him or her? And do you still have the chicken, or what's kind of the story? I want to know the name, and I want to know the story about the chicken.
So we actually refer to her now as Adele, the anti-suicide hen.
Yeah.
Dude, yeah. I mean, I've got pictures of this chicken, and I mean, she used to jump in my lap all the time, and like go after my sandwiches and shit. And it's like every time I walked in the yard, she just wouldn't leave me alone. She's sort of like, "Hey, what are you doing? Hey, let's go get something to eat." And it was just the coolest thing. But she's been gone for a while now, man. Unfortunately.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I got a really personable goat out here named Willie. We've got a cow named Corabelle. That's she is definitely a therapy cow. Yeah, because she wants to rub all over you as soon as you walk in the pasture. And I mean, like, I've got guys from Warrior Transition Battalion that come out here, and they just want to feed alfalfa cubes to the cows, man, and that's all they want to do. Sort of like, go to it, man. That's what they're here for.
For sure.
If you just need a minute in nature with animals that are 3 times your size, go ahead, bro.
And it is cool how just generally intuitive animals are, right? Like I've got Finn, my service dog, German Shepherd, trained in pressure and distraction, right? And he knows, right? Like if I wake up, family gets off for the day. Like I've gotten to the point now where I can get up in the mornings and I can, just like we would do at boot camp, right? You get up and you better be ready to go, because otherwise those drill sergeants are going to find you, and you gotta fake it till you make it, right? I can get up in the mornings now. I've gotten so good at it. I might be having a terrible mood day, but I can fake it till I make it and get the kids and the wife out of the house. And as soon as they're gone, Finn is already sitting next to me, leaned against my thigh as I'm standing there. And I just look down, and he's already looking at me. He's like, Dad, come on, man, just take me for a walk or something. But animals just in general are so intuitive, and it's so amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is pretty cool, man. I mean, the animals we've got out here, they're very personable, and that's because there's so many students that are always around them. And we don't have anything that's like inherently dangerous as far as an animal would go, like a really pissed off cow or a buffalo or some kind of
Yeah.
crazy shit
Yeah.
like that, But yeah, I mean, it's funny to me because I get students that are veterans or active duty, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm really interested in getting into farming," and they have no idea what to expect
Right.
when they get out here. And on day one, it's like, okay, here's how to be safe around these animals. Let's talk
Yeah.
about it real quick. All right, go get buckets. Y'all are going to feed them now. And they're just sort of like, shit,
Yeah.
already? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome to the
They
farm,
got to eat.
you know? So, yeah, we throw them right on into the fire the minute they get here. And
Don't want to be.
yeah, so
Don't want
it's
to
a
be
good
around a
time.
bunch of hangry animals.
Yeah, yeah. It's 9:30 and 9 a.m. is feeding time for everybody on the farm. So that's why everybody's screaming at you right now,
For sure. For sure. So how long now have you been running the nonprofit, working with veterans and teaching agriculture and farming to them?
So I started the nonprofit on paper
Okay.
in 2015, and all it was just networking. I mean, we weren't even taking in money or any kind of stuff
Oh,
like that for
wow.
the longest time. And a lot of my focus was on the Fort Bragg program that I was
Okay.
building for
That
NC
makes sense.
State. But in the back, yeah, in the background, I was learning from that and looking at it from the perspective of, okay, what do I need to do with Vet Farm to make an actual farm where we can train people to do the things. And it was a great learning experience running Soldier to Ag and building that from scratch to build this, because I don't think this is anywhere else in the country right now, what we've built out here. So the way that everything out here works is 53 acres. We've got a little classroom, but we have got a wide variety of pretty much entry level agricultural production models going here on the farm. So we've got poultry with chickens and turkeys. We've got cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs. And then we've got the green side. We call it the fur side or the green side. But on the green side, we do horticulture that includes landscape ornamentals or vegetables
Nice.
or whatever. And we go through an entire horticulture curriculum. We go through a soil science curriculum out here with everybody. We do
Oh, wow.
hydroponics,
Okay. Yeah,
aquaponics,
cool.
aeroponics. We show people, like, I'm getting ready to do the class for my current class on mushroom production and how to grow mushrooms on logs, how to grow them
Yes.
out of bags, stuff like that. And then we've got grapevines and stuff like that. So the whole idea behind it is this is a suicide prevention program
Mm-hmm.
for the veteran community, because 6 of my Marines have committed suicide since I got out. And, every time I get another one, it's just, it gets worse and worse. But that's what I kind of built a lot of the program around unofficially, was to try to alleviate some of those things. So the way it works is they come in, we expose them to all of these various production models that we're maintaining and my staff maintains here on the farm. And we show them the economics, marketing, business side of each one of those things as they're going through. That way they get exposure and get their hands dirty on various stuff, because in the consulting days of Vet Farm, going around looking at everybody that was struggling, they all had pretty similar things going on, where they had jumped in they had somehow bought land, and then they were buying animals and figuring it out from there. And almost all of them went in the direction of animals, because animals are way more therapeutic. Sure. It seems like a fun thing to get into, but the problem is that from a business perspective, animals don't make money unless you get to a certain capacity. And a lot of startups are not ready for that level of capacity they're going to need to go to or even know about it. So we expose everybody to the various things. And it's funny because they'll come in and they all have this idea of the direction they want to go into. And by the end of month 3 in the program, in the 6-month program out here, they've completely changed what they want to do. And that is in and of itself a solid win for a beginning farmer, because if you were to go buy a farm and start setting it up for the idea that you think you want to do, only to figure out I don't like it. It doesn't make money. And why am I doing this? I've saved you from a minimum of
Oh
about
yeah, easily.
$400,000 that that's gone out the window just by you being out
Well,
here in
and
3 months.
sorry to cut you off.
So,
And us veterans, we are so good at doing like 0 to 100, right? Like 0 to hero. And
yep,
we take that transition. And we're like, oh, I'll
yep,
be a farmer, right? I'm going to raise whatever, cattle, livestock, right? And then we're like, well, what do I think I need? Oh, I need 25 head of cattle. Great. I'm just going to go buy some land and 25 head of cattle and figure it out from there. And you're so
yeah,
overwhelmed, right? Because all you've done is add another layer of complexity
yep,
onto that. You've already lost your identity. You have that transition period. And now you're like,
yep,
most likely, like you said, going to fail, right? Lacking knowledge,
mm-hmm,
not effort, but lacking knowledge,
yep,
experience, huge components to it. And then the next thing you know, it's like, oh, okay, I lost my identity. I transitioned. I tried farming. I failed. And then that's right back to where you said, like, and I thought it was cool how you said, your program is as much about helping veterans understand and learn farming as it is suicide awareness, suicide prevention. And I think absolutely. And it's awesome that you have the awareness of that. I think that's
yeah,
super cool.
sure, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, what you're saying is absolutely right, 0 to 100. And that's, unfortunately, that is the absolute worst thing you can do starting a farm is going
Yeah,
from 0 to 100 because there's way too much unknown for you as a beginning farmer and a veteran coming into this space. And it's an extremely dangerous thing to do. The statistics that are out there on beginning farms longevity show that about 95% of all startup farms go under in the first 5 years. And that's a ridiculous
that,
amount of anybody
that
coming into an
is, that
industry.
is.
And it's all due to just simple ignorance of what it is you're doing
Yeah.
and what you're
And
getting
well,
yourself
and the
into.
average person, if you walked
So,
up to him and said, hey, if you hand me $500,000, there's a 95% chance you're going to lose all of it. You cool with that? He'd be like, no,
yep,
no way I'm going to do that
yep,
with you. Right. So flipping it
right,
around. So 6 month process, based on everything you explained with all the class and everything so far, like it sounds very comprehensive and it sounds unbelievably helpful and useful to anyone trying to enter that space. And even if they're not entering that, or they
yep,
decide they don't want to enter that space, it's not a wasted 6 months, right? Going back to that idea of going from being selfish to self care, there's still a huge component of self care there because
right,
6 months as you're transitioning, that's a lot of time to process through a lot of things, especially as you're feeding the cows or feeding the goats. I mean, and I'm
yeah,
not saying that so that it sounds silly. I'm saying that to say it takes time, right? It takes time when we're transitioning. It takes us getting around people who have that wisdom, right? Components of wisdom being knowledge and
yeah,
experience that can actually see us and say like, hey, I see you, man. I know you want to be a farmer, but like, hey, bro, how are you doing? Right? Like, if I came to your program and you look at me, Robert, and you're like, hey, guy, like, I see you. I think it's cool. You got all this passion and energy, but like, how are you, the human, doing? And the value there is
yeah,
just, it's awesome, man. It's awesome. Um, I want to fire another
right,
question your way. Before I do, well, I'm gonna throw the question your way. Think about it for a minute while you're doing that. I'm going to do my spiel so we can kind of get more subscribers and get some people onto our websites here. Um, if you could jump into a time machine, travel back in time, and tell young Robert anything, it doesn't matter whether it's a piece of advice, a recommendation, a life lesson you've learned. What would it be? Just think about that for a second while you're thinking about that. To all of our listeners, do us a favor, reach down there, please hit that like and subscribe. It means so much to us. Check out ORW Foundation while you're down there. 100% free retreats for individual males and female veterans, as well as spouses. We have couples and family retreats. We'll have the link in there for Robert's nonprofit with farming. And that way, if you're interested in coming to a retreat with ORW Foundation or going and learning about agriculture and farming through his program, it'll be there. And if you want to go one step further and drop us a comment, drop us a question, please, by all means. The algorithm loves it and we appreciate it. So, Robert, what do you got, bro?
Let's do a
Oh,
retreat
man.
out here, man.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
why
I
not?
think it'd be powerful. I think it'd be powerful.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be fun. So, pass it around
Morgan.
with
Yeah.
Red
Throw it up to
Wings.
Morgan for sure. Go ahead, please.
Cool. I wouldn't change a thing, man. I wouldn't tell myself anything other than the simple, just what's really been weird about my journey is that, and this isn't egotistical speaking, but now it's kind of rare if the topic of veterans and agriculture shows up in a conversation. For the longest time here in North Carolina, it was only North Carolina, but now it's around the U.S., which is weird. But it's rare that conversation is going to come up between people without my name popping up. And I wasn't, for the longest time, it was sort of like, I don't know how to deal with that. Like, how am I the guy that's going to,
sure.
And looking back on my life, everything that I went through leading up to this point prepared me very uniquely to build what we've built. And, we have on-farm therapists that come out here and work with the students for 2 days and talk to them about, hey, since day one you got into the military, you were told that at all costs you take care of those on your left, right, six, and forward. And hey, by the way, that's a codependency mechanism, and you've been taught codependency through military training. So are you ready to hear some other strategies for you to work with? And then she'll come out and do triage with folks. And we've had 6 people since building this program on this farm that have come forward and said, if it were not for this program and if it were not for the farm, I wouldn't be here right now. And I want you to know that. So, what we do is we make sure they are well prepared to have a purpose in ag after they leave here, which is one of the big problems with a lot of veterans. They get out and they can't find a purpose after they get out, or they're struggling with the wife, or they're struggling with, the husband, or, they're struggling with finances, or they're struggling with mental and physical health issues. So we bring in people like American Legion that sits there and goes through all their claim stuff with them in a day, tells them all the things, the real deal Holyfield about the VA system and how to get to 100% and stuff like that. And we have effectually built an entire new unit in North Carolina for folks that are coming into agriculture as veterans to check into. And now there's 900 of us in North Carolina that we can manage and work around. And, if these guys in this area of the state are doing sheep, I'm connecting all of them together. And then all of a sudden they turn into like this little squad over here, the sheep squad kind of thing going on, right? And it even goes deeper than that, because we've got Vietnam veterans who have been cranking on farms and haven't been talking about they were a veteran at all for the last,
40 years, 50.
40 years?
60s,
And who have stepped up and come to the table and been like, hey, I want to help new guys coming into this thing. And all of a sudden, we've got Vietnam guys starting to talk about their own shit. And it's like, dude, I never had a clue that this would turn into what it's turned into and grow so big and fast like it has. But it's really mind blowing, and it's really positive in the direction it's going.
Robert, I really appreciate your time today. I really appreciate you jumping on the show. I imagine, honestly, I'd love to have you back. I think there's some other really cool conversations we could get into for sure. So on behalf of the Unseen Journey and ORW Foundation, hey, thanks for your time. Thanks for everything you're doing. And thanks for joining us, bro.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And I look forward to coming back.
For all our listeners out there, please, again, jump down there, hit that like and subscribe button. Unseen Journey, we're coming at you every week, bringing unique whether it's experts, veterans, the whole gambit. And whether you're a veteran or not, right? We're just talking about life, right? When you get down to it, we're talking about life.
Yeah.
So yeah, reach down there, hit that like, subscribe, check out our website for ORW Foundation. Robert, tell me the name of your nonprofit again.
It's the Veterans Farm of
There you
North
go.
Carolina,
The
Inc.
website link is going to be down there in the comments below. And if you want to drop us a comment or question, we would appreciate that as well. So thank you all for joining us today. Robert, thanks again for joining us. And we'll see you again next week, everyone.